The Frisian influence on Old Saxon. The goal of this video is to help you identify the Frisianisms in Old Saxon literature and to get an eye into what older or purer Old Saxon would have looked like. The first example of Frisian influence onto Old Saxon is actually a change from A to E. So we have here contrasted as well Old Saxon with the Frisianized Old Saxon, as well as Old Frisian proper. So we see here with the Old Saxon, we have staff, glas, hard, and arm. In the Frisianized Saxon, we have stef, gles, herd, and erm. And Old Frisian proper, stef, gles, herd, erm. Interestingly enough, the Old Saxon that has been Frisianized and the word stef, the F sound is represented by a PH, which is really interesting in of itself. Let us move on. The second example, we see here a change from A to O before nasals, and nasals are N and M. In the Old Saxon, we have hand, which is self-evident, meaning hand, and we have befangen, which means surrounded. And we see here in the Frisianized Old Saxon, we have hond, and we have befongen, and in the Old Frisian, we have hond, and then we have the attested befong, which means district. The third change due to Frisian influence, we have long A becoming long E. As we see here from the Old Saxon, we have jar, lazun, onje malod, gra, grau, swaslik. And for those who are not aware, or like a reminder, the asterisk before the word is a reconstruction of the word in question. It's a theoretical guess of what the word would have been in the older form, or if you will, a purer form of Old Saxon. Moving on to the Frisianized Old Saxon, we have, assuming the G here is palatalized, a yer to lezun, jemelad, gre, sweslik. And with the Old Frisian, we have yer, lesen, onemelad, gre, and sweslik. The fourth change we see here from the influence of Old Frisian is that from Proto-West Germanic, or if you will, Proto-Germanic, the diphthong AI, becoming a long A. And this is due to Frisian influence, where we see here with the Old Saxon, we have long E. So we have helach and lera, which is interesting of itself, whereas the Frisianized Old Saxon, we have halach and lara, which is interesting of itself. However, by the time of Old Frisian, due to what is attested from the time of Old Frisian, we have helich and hilich and lare next to lera. Next, we have the fifth change due to the influence of Old Frisian, is that we have here in the Old Saxon, we have her, so this long E became a long I. So in the Frisianized Old Saxon, we have hier, and this is simply the word for here as we'd use it in English. And then we have the Old Frisian proper, which is as the Frisian'd Old Saxon, so it's just simply here, but in Old Saxon, it's her. The sixth change due to Frisian influence is that we have long A, N, turn into long O, N. So, for example, we have in Old Saxon manuth, manoth, wanian, and reconstructed ramon. Then we have the Frisian'd Old Saxon, or if you will, Frisianized Old Saxon, monoth, wonian, and this interesting one where it's a diphthong. On the surface, it looks like High German influence, or it could be a mixture of both. But who knows whether this would have a slight High German influence mixed in within Frisian influence. But who knows? And then finally, we have an Old Frisian proper, monath, wena, or if you will, wona, ramia, remia, or reconstructed romia. Moving on. Now for the seventh change from Frisian influence, we have AN to long O. I find this one fascinating because we go from Old Saxon, reconstructed anthar, or it could be pronounced as andar, likely andar, because we have two voiced sounds here. N is voiced, n and a is voiced, so it'll be likely andar. And then we have andar, and then we have santh, reconstructed. But andar is what's attested. And then with the Frisianized Old Saxon, we have odar, and we have soth. So this is really telling. I don't know. This is really telling, because this could explain why a lot of other words in Old Saxon why it's spelled the way they are, due to the Frisian influence. And then finally in Old Frisian we have oter and sort. Actually, S and sort could actually be pronounced as a Z, so a Z sound, but let's move on. The eighth change due to Frisian influence we have from IO or EO diphthong turning into IA in Frisianized Old Saxon. So we have here in Old Saxon of diop, and then in Frisianized Saxon diap, and in Old Frisian proper diap. In the ninth change, we have something very interesting. We have from the Proto-West Germanic, or if you want to go further back to Proto-Germanic, diphthong au becoming long a. So we have here in Old Saxon bom, ost, and doth, into Frisianized Old Saxon bam, ast, and dad. And then in Old Frisian proper bam, ast, and dad. As for the 10th change due to Frisian influence, this will be in a few parts. So we have from O, final O, to final A. In this case, we're specifically talking about the genitive plural. We have here with kindle, godaro, sundikaro. And with the Frisianized Old Saxon, we have kinda, guodara, and sundikara. And finally, in Old Frisian, we have kinda, godera, sundikera, or zundikera, or sondikera, or a later pronunciation with the initial S, zondikera. Next, we have the same change, but dealing with nominative, singular, masculine, weak nouns. All right, so we have goda, minnesko, and warsago. With the Frisianized Old Saxon, we have guoda, menniska, and warasaga. And finally, in Old Frisian proper, we have goda, manniska, and reconstructed wersega, or arguably werzega, or if you will, wersega, or what have you. But moving on. In the third example, we have from final O to final A in comparatives and superlatives. So starting with Old Saxon, we have betaro, nesto, letsto, and unrechtaro. Moving on to the Frisianized Old Saxon, we have betera, lesta, unrechtara, and finally in Old Frisian proper, betera, masta, lest, and reconstructed unrichtera. Finally, we see this even in adverbs. So we have here in Old Saxon, verachtliko, or versliko, and then we have the Frisianized Old Saxon, verachtlika, and finally in Old Frisian, reconstructed verchtlika. Moving on. Similar to the previous section of the video, this section here has several parts to it. So we see a change here due to Frisian influence from final A to final E. We definitely see this in weak feminine nouns, starting with the Old Saxon proper, tunga, herta, and panna. In Frisianized Old Saxon, tunge, herte, and panne. And then in Old Frisian proper, tunge, herte, and panne. This change also extended towards the genitive singular of feminine nouns. So for example, we have theoda, bona in Old Saxon, In the Frisianized Old Saxon, we have thiade, bane, and then we have reconstructed thiade and bane. This also applied to feminine nouns in the accusative singular. So, for example, we have in Old Saxon skola, to Frisianized Old Saxon skole, to Old Frisian skole. We also see this change in feminine nouns in the nominative plural. For example, in Old Saxon, we have duva, firka. In Frisianized Old Saxon, we have duffe, firke. And then we have, in Old Frisian, a few reconstructions here, duffe, duve, and then firke. So that's something to bear in mind. It's interesting how from the Old Saxon to Frisianized Old Saxon, we have this phenomenon called Germanization. So we have a double F, and it's unvoiced, whereas the Old Saxon is a V, so it's voiced. So I just thought I'd point that out. Moving on. This also extends to pronouns. So in Old Saxon, we have ina and usa. Then moving on to Frisianized Old Saxon, we have ine and uze. The former is him, it in the accusative singular, and the latter is in the nominative accusative plural. And then we have the Old Frisian. We got hine, hini, hina, and uze and uzer. Old Frisian has both forms. This sound change also happened in some adverbs and some prepositions. So we have here in Old Saxon, inna and fora. In Frisianized Old Saxon, we have inne, fore, and in Old Frisian, inne and fore. Moving on. Now moving into the 12th change due to Frisian influence from medial E to medial I. So in Old Saxon, we have felis and gevan. In Frisianized Old Saxon, we have filis. And then we have, now this word is interesting because we have the Frisianized influence, and we also have not only just the Frisian influence, but we also have the front vowel being an I. According to Holthausen, this would be pronounced, this could be arguably pronounced two ways. It could be pronounced as givan or yivan. And then moving on to the Old Frisian proper, I have two reconstructions here. It could be written as filis and yiva. Now, section 13 is interesting. This has to do with palatalization. So, and this happens when you have K before E with I. And then Holthausen, he describes it like, oh, it's like Frisian in English. So I'm not too sure what he means by this. Is he implying like a sh sound as in sheep in English? Or is he also implying ch as in church in English? I don't know. I'm really not sure because defensively, you could argue the pronunciation of Old Saxon of this Frisian influence. It could very well be pronounced as sort of like a skia sound or a kia sound, as we see in early West Saxon, which is early West Saxon is probably 9th century, is around the same time as the Heliand. But just to play it safe, I'm just going to take Holthausen as he says it as it is. I don't really want to impose Joseph Wright here at this moment because I don't want to confuse you guys. So anyway, so moving on. So with Old Saxon, we have Kenyan, Jehuilikes, Folkskepi, Ketil, and then we move on to the Frisianized Old Saxon. So according to Holthausen, if I understand him correctly, he doesn't elaborate too much on the pronunciation. He just says, "Oh yeah, this is like Frisian in English." So I'm not too sure how I'm supposed to interpret this. So it could be pronounced as Chen Nian Jehuiliches Folk Shepe and Chietel. It could very well be pronounced like that, or I guess, or possibly an earlier pronunciation would be the Joseph Wright manner, if you will. But moving on to the Old Frisian, Kenna,
gewelliges, Volksskip, and kettle. I mean, very well, these could be pronounced with a ch sound and a sh sound. But this is probably an interesting discussion in of itself, but let's move on. So here we are with the 14th change due to Frisian influence, that we have the short form of dative singulars of the masculine and neuter. Starting off with Old Saxon, we have imu, themu, thesemu, huemu, and aldemu. When Frisianized, these were shortened. So we have im, them, thesum, huem, and aldum. In Old Frisian, we have interesting ones here. We have him, hiam, taham, tihisse, disse, huam, alda, alde. As for the final change due to Frisian influence onto Old Saxon are some rare forms. So we have a rare form for, well, let's start with the Old Saxon. And this is the word for men, plural. So for Old Saxon, you have a few variations here. You got man, men, man. And then moving on to how, in Old Saxon it was huo, hua, and hueo. And then the word for with, you have mid, midi. Arguably, it could be pronounced as mithi, because there was a time where ed, and the distinction between ed, th, and d, or the th sound, if you will, in general, with that character, there was a bit of confusion of Holthausen doesn't really know. I think if I read him correctly, he doesn't know. He can't trace when exactly. How can I word it? Like they're sort of like lost distinction between the two, so it kind of got muddled. So very well, the ed, as you can see here, the Frisianized version could very well be pronounced as mid, but arguably myth as well. So anyway, so we have midi, or arguably mithi, myth, but also arguably with the other spellings, mit, an aspirated T, or just mit, and then met. Now for the Frisianized Old Saxon, it's simply men, who for how, and myth, arguably myth or mid, depending on which pronunciation you want to use, or how you want to date your own pronunciation, but moving on. Then we have Old Frisian proper, so we have mon, man, men, and this is the plural for men, and then we have how, which is who and ho, and then finally with the word with, we have here in Old Frisian mit and mei, which is really interesting of itself, because we have to bear in mind that when we talk about Old Frisian, we're not talking about a language that was spoken at the same time as Old Saxon. That's something to bear in mind. Old Frisian is a little further ahead as far as time is concerned. And that's it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you are new. And if you really like the channel, please become a channel member. Thank you. Bye-bye.